This is the Money Loves Women podcast, the podcast that will guide women to wealth and an extraordinary life. Here's your host, Dr. Deborah Ekstrom.
This is Dr. Deborah Ekstrom for Money Loves Women. Curious about your wealth building potential? Learn your money type. Take the money personality inventory to discover ways to better leverage your strengths and avoid a walk on the dark side. Go to Money Loves Women website to take our money personality quiz. That's moneyloveswomen.com. To your wealth and happiness. This is Dr. Deborah Ekstrom. This is Dr. Deborah Ekstrom for Money Loves Women podcast. I'd like to welcome Janice Elpert. She's a licensed clinical therapist, and she's been on Oprah not one, not two, but 3 times. She's an eating disorder specialist. She's an author, and she's now a podcast host of the popular show On Purpose. It's dedicated to exploring life lived with intention and on purpose via the stories and wisdom of others. She championed a mindset of abundance, and we're really in accordance there. Her passion is to help others find their purpose in life. Welcome, Janice. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thanks, Deb. So nice to meet you. I'm so happy to be here. It's always fun. Yeah.
Great. Tell us a little bit about your growing up years, what your early life was like, what your influences were, and how you came to be involved in the sorts of things you do now.
Okay. So first of all, I grew up actually on the south side of Chicago, very middle class. I'm the middle of 3 children, very kind of typical 50s, 60s kind of background, very nice little neighborhood in the South Shore, a lot of families, a lot of people from like my dad, they was from the Depression era. So just a very nice, I'm not saying everything was perfect. Of course it wasn't, but just a very typical, whatever that would be like of the 50s and 60s. What was, I thought not as typical and probably had some influence in my life. Well, my mom was a stay-at-home mom, but very active in, parent teacher, PTA, that kind of stuff, PTO. My dad was a tailor because his dad was a tailor. And when he came back from the war, he went into the tailoring business, and then he always wanted to be an attorney. So he went back to college and law school after he had the 3 of us and became a lawyer at age 41. So while raising a family, because my mom didn't work, so working full time, going to school, raising 3 kids. And I remember I was 11 when he became an attorney. My brother and I all went to Springfield together. My sister was too young, and I watched my dad be sworn in. So that was a very kind of impactful, I think, memory when looking back on it, that, you know what, you can do anything you want at any age you want. That was kind of the message. Our general, in terms of values, education was something that was always very important. It wasn't like, where you're going to college, you are going to college. And so that was kind of the main gist of what, we were all taught, as were my cousins. I had 11 or 12 close cousins, and we all lived in the same neighborhood. And it wasn't a question. You were after high school, you went to college. So I met my boyfriend, who then became my husband, first husband. I won't say number 1 husband, but he was my first husband. And we met in high school, and my goal really, I wasn't even that college interested. I really thought I would just go to college a couple of years and marry him. And my dad's rule is that he, from the Depression, felt you can just get as good an education in Illinois, where we were from. So there wasn't a question that we were going anywhere out of state. So I went to a college not too far. I mean, I did go to college, but it wasn't far away. And I used to see my boyfriend at the time all the time. And I just thought, I didn't really have a major. I didn't really have a passion. At that time, my hair is naturally curly. So all I wanted was straight hair. And that was kind of my focus. I was a very deep person, I watched all my children back in the day, and really didn't have any passion or thought of what do I want to do. I just thought I want to marry him and have children. And that was it. After I was a sophomore in college, though, I had to actually declare a major. And he wasn't exactly saying, he's a few years older than me, wasn't asking me to marry him. And I thought, well, as long as I'm here, I might as well finish school. So I got my degree in teaching, not because I had some big desire to be a teacher. It's just that's what everybody was doing. And it seemed the easiest route to go to get my degree. So that's what I did. I became a teacher. And I did graduate college in whatever that was, June, got married in August to the high school sweetheart, started teaching. I taught 4th grade for a couple years right after I got married, and started my little life. And then after I was I was in an innovative program that was very experimental in college back then. And so I was very much like, let the children learn on their own, kind of very open classroom, very liberal. Now I would probably not be quite, now I feel like a little structure probably is a little better, but I was in a school that was the antithesis of their philosophy. So my principal was not really that. Here I was 21 years old, 22. What did I know? And he was like, what are you doing? You're letting the kids read in cubby holes? No, get them in their seats. So it wasn't a great experience. I don't think I was if I'm being honest with myself, I don't think I was a really fabulous teacher. I think I had potential if I had been in a different environment. That's why I laugh that later on I ended up teaching graduate school. And now I would say I would actually am a very good teacher, or have been in my adult career. But at that time, no. Then I got pregnant. And so I quit teaching, was happy to quit teaching. And really what happened in terms of how I started asking the deeper questions was, so none of my friends were having babies yet. I was very young. I was 24. I was very young. And when I had, my son's name is Josh. And when I had Josh, my oldest, I remember when they brought him to me going, so who are you and who am I to raise you? Who are you going to be? And I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. And how is this going to really, really work? And I'm just going to take a step back because I do want to talk about a little bit in terms of the law of synchronicity and spirituality. When I was pregnant with Josh, Lamaze was very popular at that time. It was prepared childbirth, and everybody was taking these classes. And so my husband and I, ex-husband, but husband at the time, we took this class, and our instructor asked if anybody in the class wanted to have their birth filmed for educational purposes. They were going to show it in schools, and I'm pretty open, liberal, and I had seen a birth in college of filming. I thought, I think I would like to do this. So we ended up having Josh's birth filmed. And it was, fast forward to many years later, they actually showed it in Josh's high school. So here my son is 15, 16 years old, taking a health class. And now his mother they're showing my film in his health class. And he's like mortified. And people are going, oh, we saw your mother in all her glory. But that's not the coincidence. I'm going to tell you the other coincidence in a minute. But anyways, so I had this baby and thought, I don't know who you are. Don't know who you are, who I am to raise you. I just don't know. And right around there, I had always been thin, and my mother was overweight, and I became kind of obsessed as I started asking the deeper questions of who am I and who am I as a mom, but more deeply, who am I as a person? I started becoming very consumed with diet and weight and exercise, but ad nauseum. It was like ridiculous. That's all I could think about. I was on every diet there was possible. I was an exercise aficionado. There was nothing that I didn't know about nutrition, etc. And it became, now in retrospect, I really felt I was out of control. I was binging, I was fasting. My weight ultimately was going up and down. Never horribly. I'd say the most I probably ever gained was 20 pounds, and I'm tall. So to someone else, that probably wouldn't have been a big deal. But for someone who was always tall and thin, for me, it was a very big deal. I was very upset. But more importantly, I didn't like my behavior. It would not be uncommon for me if I was having a bad day. I could stop at Dunkin' Donuts and get some, half a dozen donuts, and then go to 31 Flavors or, Baskin Robbins and get ice cream and eat it all within a 2-hour period. I never did purge, but I would feel bloated and sick. And then the next day I would eat cottage cheese. It was just a horrible, horrible cycle. And then around that same time, I was trying to get pregnant with baby number 2, and my body just wasn't cooperating. Again, in retrospect, I think a lot of that had to do with my eating disorder and me trying to figure out who I am as a person. And we ended up, I couldn't get pregnant. And we had talked a little bit about adoption. And a friend of mine all my friends were having their second babies, and I was trying to be happy for them, but sad for myself. And one of my friends had a little girl, and I held that baby and I went, I could take this baby home and love this baby. So it was like, yeah, I think we could adopt. And, I was still young. So I wasn't like the door was closed to maybe getting pregnant in other ways, in terms of other fertility. That it was very kind of new then in terms of fertility options. But it turned out that just by coincidence, we got a call from someone that my husband knew, a cousin, and he was a lawyer. He never did adoptions. And he said, we have this woman who's from California, but she's having her baby here. She's looking for a nice family. I thought of you guys. Are you interested? And we said, yeah, for sure. I mean, we weren't even looking. The baby was due in the end of May. And at that point, we had just gotten a new copy of the film of my birth. So before it was on this huge reel, and my ex-husband had put it on, our husband at the time had put it on at that time it was a Betamax VHS tape. So we decided this one day in June to watch, which I hadn't seen the birth. At this point, Josh is 4.5. So we're watching me give birth on this one day of June. And about 45 minutes later, I get the call that Michael, my second son, was born. So while I'm watching myself give birth, my other son was born. So we talk about this, how he couldn't come through my body, but it's meant to be that he was my, my son. Anyways, had baby number 2, and somewhere in there decided that I needed some help with my eating disorder. So I went for some help, and through my own therapy process, and I decided to go back to school, that I needed to do more in my life. I was not someone who was okay with just, not that there's anything wrong with that. I got bored. I mean, even when Josh was 4 or 5 months old, I got a job at a gift store. I just thought, I can't be home coochie cooing all day long. I need something else. I didn't know what that was. I knew I didn't want to go back to teaching, though I shouldn't say that. For a while there, I did take a course. I was going to get a master's in learning, in reading. I was going to be a reading specialist. And then I went, no, I don't really want to do that. And then I went for help, and I went, I don't know, I kind of like this counseling thing. So I went back to school and got my master's. And while I was getting my master's, I was also doing therapy, getting therapy for myself. And in the process realized, well, this is my childhood sweetheart, and I love him, and I always will. And I still do. We're very close. This is not going to work for me. And that was like a huge, big, no one in my family ever got divorced. I've got these 2 kids. What am I going to do? I don't know. And we got separated, then we went back together, and ultimately, and he was very supportive. I did finish my master's, and I opened up a private practice, and I got my eating in check, realized what some of the issues were and how to handle it in a better way, and thought, I think this is going to be my specialty. I'm going to work with anyone that has an eating disorder, whether it's compulsive overeating like I had. Well, I consider myself a bulimic without purging. So, because I used to binge in these ridiculous ways, and then I would either exercise or fast. So I didn't throw up, but same difference in many ways. So that was my specialty. And I just opened up, kind of hung my shingle. And this is 40 years ago in Illinois, you didn't even have to have a license. Anybody could have hung up their shingle. So ultimately, Illinois, now I have a license, and about 10 years later, I did have to take a test and whatnot. Happily, I did pass, I'm happy to say. So I opened up my practice, and as I said, my husband at the time was very supportive. So he helped me set it up, and, he financially supported that. But I wasn't making enough money doing that to support myself if I got divorced. But I remember one day looking in the mirror going, you know what? And I lived in a nice house in the suburbs, in the northern suburbs. We would move to an affluent neighborhood. My ex-husband did very well. And I thought, well, if I have to live in a 2-bedroom apartment in a different suburb, I'm still probably going to be happier than staying in this situation that I did not feel was feeding my soul. That now I had made a transition, now that I was in my 31, 32, no, my soul is I got to pay attention here. So we did get divorced, which ended up being a good decision for, I don't know how my kids feel about it, but it really was, he's happily married. I'm happily married. So I think it worked out. And again, we're all very close and have a very amicable situation. So then I started my private practice and had to figure out, well, how am I going to get people? I'm 30 years old, 31 years, who's coming to me? So I don't know where I got this, because it wasn't I don't know, but I became the consummate marketer. And I called up every radio, TV show, and Oprah Winfrey was doing her show in Chicago. So I started calling her producer, and Jenny Jones was doing her show here. I don't know if anyone knows who Jenny Jones is, but anyways, I was on her show, and then I was on every radio show. And I kind of liked doing the promotion, and I was in newspapers and whatnot. And from that is how my practice really started. I did groups. So I did that. And then, thankfully, I did a pretty good job. So word of mouth. And so my practice just continued to doing well. I continued doing well. And then I decided to do some public speaking. So for a while, I was a member of the National Speakers Association and did some speaking, all on eating and food related initially. Then I broadened some of the speaking to kind of spirituality and like, who are you and what's your purpose? And all began because I really looked at my little baby and said, I don't know who you are and I don't know who I am. And I got to kind of figure this out. Then I decided I needed to write a book on, actually, I had an idea for a book. And at that time, Contemporary Books, which was a publishing house, was here in Chicago. And I had sent them all my material. I got a million, of course, rejection. But just another message to all listeners. You're going to get some rejections in life. If you feel like you're on your path, you just got to keep going. So I did. And then it turned out this Contemporary Books wanted me to write a book on quitting smoking without weight gain. So I went, okay, I had never smoked a day in my life, but I wrote a book called The I Quit Smoking Diet, and they published it. But I still didn't write my other book, the one that about eating and weight loss, which I ended up calling, I Always Start My Diet on Monday. So I actually self-published that maybe 10 years later and promoted that myself. And I think it did, pretty well. So yeah. And then, so that's what I've been doing. So I've been just always on the spiritual path of enlightenment, read not every book, but a lot of books, do a lot of prayer and meditation. Nothing to do with religion, just strictly being in touch with who we are on the deepest level of ourselves, how to find inner peace in your life, even when things are not going well. And then as far as the podcast, once the pandemic hit, and who would have ever thought we're all going to be in our house for a year and a half or whatever. So I just started listening to podcasts and thought, I don't know, I think I could do a podcast. I've got something to offer here. But I was, again, like, I'm so technologically, I think I'm pretty good for my age, but I'm not like fabulous. So I started looking at how to do your own podcast on the internet. And I go, I'm not doing this. This is way above my pay grade. So I'm just not doing it. But it was still in my head that I think I'd like to do it. So we were having dinner in somebody's garage, it was the pandemic, 8 feet apart. And I started telling them about my idea. And as it turned out, my friend's husband had just been interviewed for a podcast. And he said the nicest young man was kind of coordinating everything. He kind of like a producer. I went, well, I guess I need that producer's name. And so he lives in Wisconsin. He's a young, kind of youngish. We hit it off immediately. And he takes care of all I have to do. We get people, I show up, I do my thing. He edits it and he puts it on Spotify. He put me on whatever the other, Apple Podcasts, whatever. He is taking care of everything. I just show up and we do it about twice a month because I don't want to really do it every week. And I think it's gone pretty well. We've been doing it for about a year. So it's kind of an add-on to my other stuff. I still work part-time, but I still work. And my practice, while the majority of my practice for the first, I'd say 25, 30 years was eating disorders, which is very complimentary. Once, if you're good at something, then people say, well, do you do anxiety? Do you do this? So I think that my practice is very eclectic. And currently I don't take on anyone new at this stage of the game. And yeah, so I work part-time now. I do the podcast, do a lot of meditation, a lot of reading, love watching TV shows on Netflix. Well, it got to a whole nother level this last year and a half. Like someone wants to know what the latest show is, or they'll say to me, so have you watched it? I went, yeah, I watched that like 3 months ago. Well, what was it about? I go, you think I remember? That was like 3 months ago. I watched 20 other shows since then. So, but not unhappily. And I met my husband like 20 years ago, and we're very happy. We travel the world. So I feel like I have grandchildren now, loves of my life. So I just feel like, knock on wood, I'm healthy. Life, other than this last year though even I have to say, even with this last year, I feel I learned a lot about myself in a different way, in a good way. So even with this, I was a little sad that at this stage of my life, I couldn't go on vacation. But if that was the worst thing that happened from this year and a half, so be it. We'll go, and we're going on vacation now. We will be going on vacation now. So
everybody wants to get traveling again.
Exactly.
One thing I noticed about your story, Janice, is that people seem to show up in your life, or you cause people to show up in your life when you need them. So I want to backtrack just a little bit, because eating disorders are, and always probably will be, such an interesting concern in the public. So tell me what types of eating disorders there are, first of all, and then tell me when does maybe just a little bit of lack of disciplined behavior become an eating disorder?
Right. Okay. So there are a variety of different eating disorders, but the main ones are anorexia. That's where your body weight is below, I don't even know what the exact percentage is, but it has to be below, I think 20% of whatever your normal weight would be, or body fat. And that's where people are eating very, very minimally. They probably eating. So here's the thing about anorexia. I've had girls who go, but I do eat. And so for breakfast, they might have a half an English muffin. They say, see, I have carbs. And then for lunch, they might have 4 pieces of lettuce and some carrots. And they go, see, I have a salad for lunch. And then for dinner, they might have the same thing, another salad. And then they might have a snack of an apple. And they go, but see, I eat all day long. So there's a misnomer, I think, and a misconception that if you're anorexic, you basically don't eat at all. I've had them too. If they're that bad, then I usually refer them to an inpatient program. So that's kind of anorexia. And the difference between well-disciplined and an eating disorder, I think it's kind of a fine line. So I know I have met many people who I think are highly disciplined with their food and their exercise. And I think they teeter on potential eating disorder. The reason why, just using adolescents as example, where they, one of the main criteria for an eating disorder is that they're amenorrhea, they're not getting their period. So then, like it's a problem. It's really a problem. So that's kind of anorexia. Then there's bulimia, and that's where you're eating. It doesn't have to be a large quantity of food. It can be. You can be a binge person, and you are doing some kind of purging, which is either inducing vomiting or taking excessive laxatives. And usually you eat. Now, for some, and there's just like every other disease or syndrome in, the DSM, there's gradations. So there are some people that can eat for a week or 2 weeks and never purge. And there are other people that are purging 3 times a day. So to me, if you're purging in whatever way that is, which is either excessive laxatives or putting your finger down your throat or whatever, then you have bulimia. And so it's not like, oh, do I have a little bulimia? No. If you're doing those things, you have a problem and you need some help. Then there's the compulsive eater. And those are, you can be a compulsive eater and not necessarily be overweight. And you can also be a compulsive eater and be overweight. And you can be overweight and not be a compulsive eater. I sometimes feel bad for those that are overweight who there is a legitimate metabolic reason, and they're just heavier than what America sees. Because, when you think about the, how this, started, eating disorders, well, Freud would say it started a long time ago. But when I think of what really put it in the media was back in the 60s, there was a model named Twiggy from London, and she literally was a twig. I don't know if she had an eating disorder, but she became the role model in my generation in particular for how you're supposed to look. And I think that has continued. I think that the ideal figure for a woman, I'd like to think we're changing a little bit, but I don't know, is still ridiculous. I think that people weigh different things for different reasons, particularly women. And it's not that men can't have eating disorders. It's just primarily a female, because of some of the reasons I'm describing in terms of both the media, even back before all the internet, and also just women in general. We're pleasers. It's how are you going to get a man? Most people with eating disorders are perfectionists. They have to be, they feel they have to be a certain way in order to be okay. They don't really know who they are except for their outside self. And so those are the 3 main eating. There is also, it's called I think there's actually a name for it, but again, I haven't really been doing much with eating disorders list about 8 years, but there is an exercise eating disorder. I know there's a name for it, but it's not coming to me right now. And that's for people who are exercising like 3, 4, 5 times a day. And they put it under the umbrella of, I'm just being healthy and I eat okay. And mostly they probably eat healthy, but why do you need to exercise 4 or 5 times a day? That is not normal. So really, it's eating disorders in general. It's a problem is there's all kinds of, levels of how we're going to eat and take care of ourselves. The more you're relaxed about it, conscious. I mean, I want to be conscious of what I eat, and both for health reasons and appearance wise. But if it's really all that you think about all day long, because a lot of it, it's, what's going on in your head, that's a problem. But it's also what's going on the number on the scale and your general overall health. So
what are the major psychological issues that are driving this behavior? You talked a little bit about perfectionism. Are there other things?
That's the number one is perfectionist, being a perfectionist. A lot of the teenagers I've worked with are from families. I can't remember who coined this, but one of the original people that I read a zillion years ago, we call girls from eating disorders. They're all from the fine family. So what I mean by that, when you ask them, how's everything? It's fine. So really it's fine. Your daughter's throwing up, but everything is fine. Really? So there a lot of, in terms of familial dynamic is there are not many of the families, and I'll include my own, when I think back of why did I end up having one, they're not big on expressing feelings. There are right feelings and wrong feelings to have. And if you, God forbid, had a wrong feeling, which might be like anger or sadness, and then you vented those feelings or shared those feelings, you probably were going to get ostracized or punished or whatever. So girls learn, many who end up with eating disorders, to hold their feelings back, don't say what they truly feel or think in their home. Then when they go out into the real world, they continue that because that's what they've learned. So that's one of the other main things is this pleasing, and I'm not allowed to feel all my feelings, whatever those might be, because that's just not okay. And so a lot of my work with them was combating that. Like, no, there are no such thing as feelings that are right or wrong. Feelings are actually the pathway to our soul. They tell us who we are, and it's what you do with the feelings. So we all have things that we wish we didn't feel, but we do feel them. So then what do you do with that? I wouldn't.
That's really interesting information. Tell me a little bit what it's like to be on Oprah.
Well, I mean, she's not doing the show right now. So, but all right. So back in the day, it was fun. It was exciting. I thought this was really, really funny though, in terms of appearance or whatever. So I'd been on the show twice. So the third time that I was on, they called me. So imagine getting a voicemail. Hi, this is the producer of the Oprah show. So I wasn't courting them at this particular time, but they were doing a show on overweight girls who they had sent to an overweight camp because, Oprah had her own thing with weight, and they wanted a professional to come on to, kind of talk to the girls and whatnot. So, but before I came on, I interviewed with the producer, not the executive producer, but the one underneath her. And then she said, okay, now you have to talk to the real producer, the next producer. So it was like, I said, why don't you just pull the tape I was on? They were very concerned. This is one of the things I remember, that I looked okay. I had to have a certain look. And I literally had to say, you won't be disappointed with my appearance, but go look at the tape. I'm fine. And I'm articulate, but I thought this was just so fascinating. Now, and she wasn't, I don't even know if she was national yet. It might've been right before she came national, I think, but they had a limo come get me the 2 days before, and they had to interview me in person to make sure that I was okay, both intelligence wise and looks wise. But one of the questions, I'll never forget this, was she said to me, do you think you are the foremost expert in the nation on eating disorders? And I went, well, I'm not exactly sure who would say yes to that. So I said, because I don't even know what that means. It seems like a little bit egocentric to say yes, but here's what I will tell you. I promise you, I know what I'm talking about. And if you have me on, I'll do a good job. And I guess that was a good enough answer. So on I went, and so it was fun, and it was good, and it was good for my career, and I loved doing it, and I think I did a nice job. I still have the tape. I don't know.
Excellent.
Yes.
It sounds like it would be a lot of fun.
It was. It was a lot of fun.
Fun to interact with Oprah for sure.
Yeah. Well, I have to say, and I think she's, I have tremendous respect, whatever. She didn't really, she came and did the show. There wasn't any, at least now, who am I? I'm not hurt by this, but there was no chit chat with she and I. No, And she didn't even really converse that much with the girls afterwards, to be honest with you. So that was, to be honest, I thought that was a little disappointing, but I think she probably does at that time was doing 3 shows a day. So in her defense, and again, I think she's an amazing person, and I think she's an unbelievable interviewer. So I just think she's a tremendous icon in our in the media and in our culture. So, but yeah, it was fun. It was good.
Sounds fun. You are a real champion of the mindset of abundance.
I am.
And I want to hear more about that. Tell me about your journey to developing this mindset, because it sounds to me like early on when you were getting married and doing your education and so forth, you were just kind of going down the road of what you thought was kind of the expected.
Totally.
And somehow you really developed this spirituality and this connection and this deep introspection and inspection of yourself. So tell me about all of that, and then tell me why about the mindset of abundance.
Okay, so first of all, part of how this all happened, it does help to have some other people in your life who are on the path with you. So now I didn't know when I met my college friends that we were all, it was the 60s. What do you think we were doing? There was marching going on. Not that I was a big marcher. There was protesting. There was a little other things going on. So none of us were, it's not like any of us were like, let's have a deep conversation. We were just having fun. It was, as I said, the 60s, 70s, we just had fun. So I don't know how it turned out that my sister and I are very close. She's on the spiritual path. And I have 2 other friends that I met in college that are also on the path. And we all just started talking about it. We started going to workshops. I don't even remember how this happened, but we found an astrologer in our area, it's 40 years later. I just had a reading. I think last year I had a reading with him. He's, in his 70s now. We just always had an interest. And then we found this really amazing woman who I still see once a year, just for the heck of it, who is a psychic, but she's more than that. She originally has an MSW. So she originally was a therapist, and then she found that she had this talent. So she's been a tremendous guide in my life. And so when you do the kind of work where you're really looking inside yourself, I suppose you can do it just by your own, like meditating and whatever. But I'm a researcher, I guess, and a searcher. So I had tons of books. I went to tons of spiritual workshops. My sister and I have sometimes laughed, and I hope this doesn't sound horrible, but we see ourselves as very mainstream, because that's one of the things about when you start moving down the road of spirituality. Some people think, well, there's going to be a lot of kooks there, or it's going to be weird. And maybe there'll be some people that are a little off center, but you know what? If you can just go with the attitude that there's something here to learn, and that's part of what, I don't even know how to do therapy at this stage of the game without including spirituality. And that includes abundance, which I'll get to in a minute. So I just learned a lot. And with each person that I saw, or each workshop that I went to, or each book that I read, one of the books I read, I remember early on, was by Shakti Gawan. I'm sure, I don't know, maybe her real name is Mary Smith. I don't know. But anyways, I laugh at some of the funny names, but she wrote a great book called Creative Visualization. That was one of the first books I read. So this is like 40 years ago, well, longer, probably 45. My son is going to be 47. So around then, 45 years ago, maybe. And she talked about visualizing what you want, and very much on the spiritual path of, this is who we are, and our souls, we're more than a body, we're a soul, and we're supposed to have whatever it is that we're supposed to have in our life. We're meant to have it as a spiritual being. And so we're supposed to have abundance. And so I remember thinking, oh, okay. I didn't exactly know what I was looking for, what that meant, but I thought I like the concept. And then I saw someone else who talked about doing a vision board so like when I wanted my book published and I wanted to be on Oprah, I literally took out a cardboard, bought a piece of cardboard at wherever, and ripped out pieces in a magazine of, at that time, Barnes and Noble. And I had a picture of myself with the name of my book. And then I had a picture of Oprah. And I thought, I'm going to be on Oprah. And I literally would look at that every day and go, I'm going to be on Oprah. I'm going to have my book published. And then, now you can't just do that and not do the work along with it. It's like, if I want my book published, I better sit down and type the book. So I don't want people to think that you can just think it and it will come, so to speak. You have to work along with the universe, and you put it out there, but you have to do your end. One of my favorite stories about abundance is, so I got divorced and I was single for, quite a while. And I really felt like, okay, I'm ready. I was busy with my career and raising my 2 kids, and I dated and I had a couple significant boyfriends and whatnot, but no one that was like, I think I could really say I do. And then I was ready. So I made, a client of mine bought me, an angel box filled with cookies for the holidays. And I remember I thought, well, instead of making a vision board, I'm going to fill this angel box. And what I mean by that, it had pictures of angels around it. It was just a cookie tin with angels. And I put in there exactly what I wanted in a mate, how tall he was. I put in travel because I wanted to travel. I put a picture of a diamond ring, which is exactly the one I have on my finger right now. I put in how much money. I thought, because you can ask for abundance. So I thought, all right, well, I want to feel comfortable. I mean, I was comfortable supporting, I did well in my practice, but I want to be like more comfortable. So I wrote down every specific thing I could possibly want in a partner in terms of kindness and niceness. And I always was a big fan of Richard Gere. So I thought, if you could look like Richard Gere, that wouldn't hurt either. And I put everything you could think of: sense of humor, warmth, loving, whatever. And I put it in the box, and I put it on my shelf in my closet. And every morning I would say, okay, universe, I'd really like to meet this guy. And a year later, my mother says to me, I want to fix you up with somebody. And I thought, well, I don't know if this is so great that my mother's fixing me up, but I went, okay, I'm not really dating anybody. And that was it. We met and I left that dinner and called my sister and I went, husband material. And here we are almost 20 years later. So yeah. So when you read enough about what our soul is doing here on earth and what we're supposed to be doing, it's a permission and a encouragement that you should have it all. And it doesn't mean you're going to get everything. I mean, there's stuff that happens that just happens, whether it be illness or whatever, but it's more always about what you do with that. It's not like I haven't had hardship. Believe me, I have. I'm not here to say everything has been fabulous. No, not easy. My younger son has had a lot of issues and that's been very challenging. And there's just been issues. There just always is. So we don't come here on earth to not learn and grow. But we are supposed to have abundance. And there's plenty of abundance in this world for everything, whether it be love or money, good health. I mean, you have to, if you're going to eat like crap, which I'm not so fabulous in this area, you can't be mad if your stomach is bad. You know what I'm saying? So you have to kind of work with the program here a little bit. You can't just wish it and then it will be. You have to be a participator. But it's coming from the belief that it can happen.
Thought, belief, action, and then results.
There you go.
Perfect. I want to ask you some questions because I know you're self-educated and so many high achievers are self-educated and you continue to educate.
I do.
Give me an idea of some of the significant books you have read that have impacted your results.
Okay. All right. Well, from the beginning, actually, Shakti Gawan, I love her book. I still go back to it sometimes. I think Gary Zukav does his book, Seed of the Soul, I think was very instrumental in trying to help explain in kind of pretty easy to understand. He's a pretty bright guy, what your soul is doing here on earth. I've then done a lot of reading of Pema Chodron. She's a Buddhist monk. I love her story. She had, I think she was from New Mexico or something. And her husband came home one day and said, I want a divorce. And she went, what? And she had 2 kids and she took herself to, I think, India, I don't know, wherever. And she became the first female North American Buddhist monk. And she's probably I'd say she must be in her 80s now. But I'm rereading one of her first books right now, When Things Fall Apart. It was written about 25 years ago. And there was a new version that just came out, I think, last year. So I couldn't find my old one. So I bought it again. So those were the first 3 that pop in my head. I like Julia Cameron. She did the Artist's Way program. And it's about using your creativity and saying that you don't have to be an artist. I'm not an artist at all, but it's a journaling program. I forgot to say that I do a lot of journaling and have done that for years. Just writing my feelings down, because that's one of the techniques I use to help people recover from their eating disorder. Because the belief is that especially for bingers, before you eat, you're having a feeling. So it's not just all of a sudden is really, if you looked in the refrigerator at 6, there's nothing new there at 7. So why all of a sudden is the food calling to you? Or if you pass the same bakery every day, really, is there something new there? Why on Tuesday you were fine and on Thursday you had to eat everything? Well, something you were feeling was going on. So I like Julia Cameron has a 12-week program where you really find out your creative self. And she has taught it for years. She was married to Martin Scorsese. And so I like her book a lot.
Good. All good recommendations and really interesting ones.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me again the name of the book or the author, the Buddhist monk.
Her name is Pema Chodron, Pemachotren. She's written a bunch of books, but the one I'm reading right now is one of her earlier books called When Things Fall Apart.
Very good.
And she does a lot of, she's on YouTube and she's very easy to understand. And I really, I like her whole vibe.
Yeah, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Tell me, going forward here a little bit, to kind of pull things together.
Sure.
You've been successful in your life. You've reached a lot of your own potential because of your spirituality.
I would agree with that.
You've walked a lot of other people to their potential.
Yes, I have.
And held their hand and led them into the path of spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me what you would advise women if they were to become successful in their life. And I'm not talking only financial wealth. I'm talking wealth of all kinds, abundance of all kinds.
Right.
What would be your advice? Something actionable that they could do now and carry forward for the rest of their life. What would you recommend? Something that really impact their life.
Well, one thing I feel really, really strongly about is that you have to give back. So that if you've reached, a nice monument of success, or whatever the word is, that whatever you've learned, I think we have an obligation to give back. I'm not saying you have to go spend 30 hours of your week, doing something, but I just think that when you give back, you're kind of, especially what's been going on. I feel so strongly about this with what's going on in our world and in our country, that if you want to be in a place of hate and anger, who's that helping? We're going to disagree with people. It's just how it is. I'd rather be in a place of love. So if you've gotten, again, a certain amount of success and you feel you've reached a lot of the goals that you want in your life and you feel a sense of inner peace, then figure out some way to either mentor somebody, just again, pay it forward, to give back. I think we have to give back. And even if it's writing a check to your favorite charity, there's something about the giving back that is, they say when a butterfly flaps its wings in one part of the country, in one part of the world, it has an effect all the way on the other side of the globe. I think that's true about love and giving. So even like one of the things I do every night is I always do a little prayer and meditation before I go to bed. So I breathe in love and I breathe out healing, first to myself. This is one of the major, it's called Pema Chodron. I don't think she coined it, but I think it's called Tung Lang, where you breathe in love and breathe out good health, or the other way around. But the bottom line is, first you do it to yourself, then you do it to your partner or anyone in your immediate family, then you do it to friends, then you do it to colleagues or whatever, then you do it to your community, then you do it to your country, then you do it to your world. So maybe it's however many that is, maybe 7 or 8 breaths. And just by doing that, you're giving back. And it also centers you in a way that's, you're just aligning yourself with, hey, I don't want to be in an angry, fearful place. Who wants to be scared all the time about what's going to happen? And first of all, there's nothing we can do about what we can do is what we're going to do with our own feelings and the people that we love and care about. So, people are going to hurt us or disappoint us or not necessarily agree with us. So if we want to live in a cage, I suppose we can live in a cave, then that's fine. But since I am a social being and most of us are, then let's be out in the world in a place of love. So I think you have to give back.
I really, really like that. And giving is so incredibly important. And it's paired very highly with gratitude. So when you have gratitude, you're ready to share and you're ready to give back. And I like what you talk about, being in love rather than being in fear and hate.
It just
fear and hate not only harms the world, it consumes the soul.
It does. It just feels toxic. So another author, Sarah Ban Brednach, she wrote a book called Simple Abundance about 20 years ago. And it's all about gratefulness. And it's a 365-day, every day she writes a little something different. But basically, she wants you to start your morning. I think she was on Oprah at that time. And just be grateful for 5 things. It could be that the sun is shining, or I live in the Chicago area. The leaves are magnificent. That I saw a beautiful red tree today, or yellow tree. It doesn't have to be anything huge, but every day we should all have at least 5 things that we can be grateful for, that our eyes opened. So
absolutely such a great practice. Gratitude is such a great practice. And gratitude is an attitude, but it's also a practice. So practice gratitude.
Well, that's the whole thing. And like kind of what you're saying about abundance is kind of, just to reiterate, we're not going to get necessarily what we want if we don't put in the effort and the energy about whatever. So that's what we have to do. And I think keeping a gratitude journal is really, really helpful. Keeping any kind of journal is good. Again, giving back to me is super important in whatever way that is. And there's nothing wrong with setting a limit. You don't have to say, well, I have to give every minute of my life, because the first person you have to give to always ultimately is yourself. Because if we're not taking care of ourselves, how can we give to someone else? But that's what I'm saying. We have to give whatever compassion we want to feel for the world. First, we have to feel the compassion for ourselves, because there's no human being. We don't come here to not have growing pains. Part of our life's journey is we have to have growing pains, or our soul's not growing. So it's just the way it is. Are we supposed to also have joy? 100%. And love, it's all about love. So yes, but it's not going to be, no, there's going to be stuff. And I have it too. I mean, there's nobody that I know that doesn't. And if they do, see, when I've been around people where how's everything fine and wonderful, going back to the fine family, I thought, I don't really want to be friends with you, because you're like, no. That's just not how it is, because life is not like that. It's just not. So let's be real and still be loving and kind, but don't give me that everything is fine and wonderful.
But let's live in reality.
Yes. It's tough out there.
All really, really good and very wise information. And let's carry that forward. I love it. Gratitude and giving. And I love the practice of breathing in love and breathing out healing for everyone and everyone. Yeah. That's so wonderful. Thanks so much for coming on, Janice.
My pleasure.
You're not taking patients.
Nope.
But anybody who wants to read more about you and find out about your books and anything you might recommend.
If they want to listen to my podcast, they can.
Yeah, listen to the podcast and find out how to lead your life with intention.
And on purpose, yeah. I've met the most interesting people, which I find, even meeting you is great. I just think it's if one person, I can help one person get on their path, then I feel like, yay.
That's the whole giving thing.
That's the whole giving thing.
Thanks so much for coming on.
You're so welcome. My pleasure.
Really appreciate everything you've said today. And very, very interesting, very engaging. Thanks so much, Janice.
My pleasure. You're welcome.
This is Dr. Deborah Ekstrom for Money Loves Women podcast. May blessings rain down upon you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Money Loves Women podcast. Please leave us a rating and review so we know how we can continue to help women live in abundance. Visit moneyloveswomen.com to gain more insight into how to live an extraordinary life.